I am kind of nervous, but I think I'm nervous for the same reason I was before. Just that I'm really proud of this, and it's scary, but it should be scary. It really should be. I need to be. I need to do something that makes me afraid. To that's really true bravery, true courage. And then when Ganon seizes the Sacred Realm, like they had been talking about the entire time, he says this.
The Ocarina of Time opens up the Temple of Time, where the game will skip forward 7 years into the future. There's a bit of an unnecessary cutscene where Ganon tells how this was his plan all along, blah blah blah, and then a bit more exposition.
Just as it was in Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, none of this stuff is optional to the story of Ocarina of Time. Matt wants to have his cake and eat it too, where he can ignore the story, because according to him it doesn't matter, but then when the story reaches a climax, and suddenly all of those things do gain relevance, suddenly it's this weird thing that comes out of nowhere. The truth is, it never came out of nowhere. Matt just wasn't paying attention. Like, check this one out.
But this is just one element of a much larger game, and regardless of how you feel about the visuals, it's worth considering how well the Wind Waker stands up as a Zelda game, and as a game in general. It starts out on the appropriately named Outset Island with
No, it doesn't start on Outset Island. I mean, you know full well that it doesn't. This intro explains all the supposed problems that Matt has with this story, and this is on the GameCube version where you can't even skip the cutscenes, so you've had to deliberately edit that footage out of your recording. I can't believe people take this guy seriously when he thinks that he can make a 40-minute video claiming to have some kind of insight on The Legend of Zelda. Meanwhile, every single blasted thing he says about this story doesn't contain any information in it. Matt, not only are you missing the entire point of the whole story, you're doing it on purpose. You know what the story is. You've proven that you know.
We're told that Ganon has basically won. He's got his hands on the Triforce and took over the Sacred Realm. Link got sealed away for 7 years so he could grow old enough to take him on. From here on out, most of the game is played as adult Link in the future, and it's a great idea for the plot. In most action-adventure style games that revolve around saving the world, you're given some idyllic place that needs protection, or a post-apocalyptic world where the struggle of the people compels you to try and help them. Either of these scenarios can only be so effective because we're left wondering about what exactly it is we're trying to prevent, or what exactly it is we're trying to restore. As soon as you walk into Hyrule Town 7 years on, Ocarina of Time has answered both of these questions. You have an immediate comparison in your mind of what Hyrule should look like, and what it does look like now.
You have very good reading comprehension. Just because from Tetra's point of view all of this is mysterious, that doesn't mean the player doesn't know who Zelda is. Tetra wasn't alive 100 years ago. She obviously doesn't know who Zelda is. That doesn't mean that this moment is out of character. We, the audience, do know who Zelda is. Her name's on the title screen. The only reason you wouldn't apply this logic to the Wind Waker is if you were being deliberately disingenuous to serve your opinion.
You have an immediate comparison in your mind of what Hyrule should look like, and what it does look like now. The game doesn't even take place in Hyrule, not as we know it anyway. What Hyrule should look like. The game doesn't even take place in Hyrule, not as we know it anyway. What Hyrule should look like, and what it does look like now. Well, not as we know it anyway. And what it does look like now.
But as previously established, the moral at the end of The Wind Waker is that you should accept the past for what it is and build a better future. Twilight Princess, being an alternate ending to the story, is now inverting that moral. Now, Link is the one protecting his heritage and saving his family, and Ganondorf is the one creating a future for himself in spite of his past. The shoe's on the other foot, but interestingly, Ganondorf is still in the wrong. This is the thematic purpose behind the timeline. At this point, I really have no patience for the people who pretend like the timeline is inconsequential or confusing, because its purpose here is obvious. Twilight Princess is a poetic inversion of Wind Waker. That's the whole reason that they're both sequels to Ocarina of Time. Now you're able to explore, on an emotional level, both sides of the same coin. It's fun and interesting, and it's very sad that a lot of people just can't be bothered. But anyway, how does Eiji Aonuma pull all this off? Well, Zant is the key here. Notice that Zant doesn't have to beg Ganondorf for powers or anything. Ganondorf actually comes up to Zant. Let's think about this for 2 seconds. Why Zant? Well, Zant must be special, right? Remember how Tetra is the next Zelda after her mother? Well, here, Zant is the heir to the Lost Gerudo Patriarchy. He's the third male Gerudo after Groose. Once again, this stuff would be totally obvious if Matt simply read the text on screen. Thank God it's actually on screen this time. If this was really a retrospective, like it says in the title, wouldn't it contain information that Matthew would only have access to in retrospect? Like an art book that explains the story in black and white detail. But no, just to make sure he's been contrarian to every single point made by Hyrule Historia, since that's the true reason he made these videos, he's going to insist that Zant was always supposed to be the main villain of Twilight Princess. With no evidence, mind you. Seriously? I'm not trying to be mean, but you don't have to make fun of these videos. They just make fun of themselves.
It may be a case they only made this decision because they knew many players would be replaying the game and thus would be ready for hard mode, but I hope they seriously consider this for the next Zelda. At the end of the game, you're taking on multiple Darknuts at once, who do several hearts of damage if they manage to connect.
There's a concerted effort by Matt to overgeneralize and downplay everything, not just the story. He's constantly acting like he's too good for the game. And if that's how you feel about video games, that they should have to earn your attention and respect, that's a matter of personal taste. You can like whatever you want. But don't delude yourself into thinking that attitude makes you superior to everyone else. Now, like I said, most fans these days already know most of this. Matthew is a huge outlier. But at the end of the day, even the fans who are aware just aren't seeing the bigger picture. So we need to keep zooming out. And there's a huge prerequisite before you can truly appreciate Twilight Princess as the first proper revision to Zelda's chronology.
Oh man. Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun playthrough. Anyone here never see this? Also, thank you for the host mic. Hi, everybody. Oh, so there's a lot of people who have never played this game. I think you'll enjoy this. This is going to be one of those playthroughs I think you might remember for a little while. Not because of me, but because of the game. It's just one of those games. So, really nice look at the world. For anyone who's getting Legend of Zelda vibes, it's a pretty damn different game, aside from just a couple of visual similarities and sword. And horse, and bridge, and castle. And bow, and climbing. Oh, and Zelda is in this. And Link. And Epona. And Ganon. Alright, I'll stop.
Fumito Ueda is intentionally pulling from Eiji Aonuma in multiple important points in both Ico and in Shadow of the Colossus. And Eiji Aonuma is intentionally pulling from Fumito Ueda in multiple important parts in Twilight Princess, in Skyward Sword, and even as early as The Wind Waker. So, no, Vinny. their similarities are not superficial. Ico was essentially a love letter to Ocarina of Time, and Shadow of the Colossus has a load of distinctly intentional references to Majora's Mask. Aonuma's referencing Ueda as a reciprocation of Ueda's own references to him. This is about two artists coming to an emotional agreement about something. The comparison currently on screen alone proves that they were not only good friends and have a strong relationship, but that they were actively bouncing ideas off of one another and making notes in each other's margins. Comparing side by side like this isn't revealing something shallow like their favorite flavor of ice cream, it's corroborating evidence of their authority in their own work. The big one that I always think of is this one, the spiral staircase inside the tower. Aonuma wants you to think about Yorda from Ico, and he wants you to compare Yorda in that game to Zelda's role in this game. A pale, fragile girl hiding in the shadows. And that's exactly why Ganondorf's first phase is fighting Zelda as a puppet. In Ico, Ueda was comparing the Queen to Ganondorf, specifically from Ocarina of Time. The Queen is Yorda's helicoptering mother, who won't let her daughter leave the house, and she's molding her daughter into becoming a younger version of herself. Ueda wants to show that love can be just as damaging as hate, if you're possessively loving and you don't let your children be their own people, or in Wander's case, if you try to cheat death by making a deal with the devil. He's also possessive with his love. Aonuma poetically agrees with these sentiments and has his parental figure in his game, The Wind Waker, be exclusively about that. Aonuma's talked about that several times, about how he made The Wind Waker for his son, and that Toon Link was meant to be an analog for his son. We're going to come back around to that later. These kinds of connections apply to the Twilight Princess too, but I'm talking about Wind Waker here because I think it's an easier and more obvious example, but really Twilight Princess is obvious too. Zelda fans are just incredibly dense. I mean, some of them have suggested, like, as a fan theory, maybe the Gerudo could have turned into the Twilight, but no, they haven't accepted that this is the intended interpretation. They haven't accepted that this is a fact. I mean, I know it's not everyone, but a lot of people, including Vinesauce, or Vinny, he's watching the pre-Lake Bed Temple flashback and assumes that these interlopers are some new race of people that we've never heard of. I'm not joking, he actually takes the explanation for the series' largest retcon at face value.
I don't remember any of that stuff. Okay.
By extending the
I don't remember any of this.
They don't get that Midna's hair color is meant to be reflective of Twin Rova. They don't get that Midna's dialogue before the fight reflects what Naboru tells you as a child. And they especially don't understand that Zant being a male Gerudo and wanting to reestablish the patriarchy is what all of this dialogue was always about. There is a pretty good video by Max Darrett where he talks about all the Gerudo's dark magic stuff, and how in both Zelda and in Ico, there's a focus of this dark transformation magic and body horror. But again, most of that is the bleeding edge of the fandom, and even he doesn't get into everything. But it bears repeating that none of this is a fan theory, and it's not inconsequential. It's the way that the director of both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess intended the audience to interpret their connected story, also known as canon. It's a fact. It is not a mystery. It's not even hidden. It's required for understanding the story properly. It's ridiculous that I should even need to say that, because these games, in full reality, they're not even that dense with story. These stories are moral lessons meant for children. If you just pay basic attention, this is the only way that you could interpret it. The game is practically preaching it at you. The characters explicitly tell you all this shit in dialogue. Now, unfortunately for Ueda, most of his games, the cutscenes are written as silent movies, so you don't need dialogue to be able to follow the story. But Aonuma's games require dialogue because of his background. We are getting to that later, like I said. Don't worry, we're almost there. But you can tell, like, even down to a plot level, all these connections are important. Like, How Ganon is taking girls to the Forsaken Fortress because they have yellow hair. That's just like how Aiko is taken to the Queen's Castle because he's a boy with horns. Ueda is deliberately putting you in the shoes of outcasts from cultural stigmas in his games, and, you know, those ideas of sacrifice to ward off evil are pretty essential to Shintoism, and any media-literate adult should know that Shintoism isn't important to anything created in Japan. As you can see, Aiko's connections to Zelda and Zelda's connections to Aiko are not optional pieces of this analysis. Even in Vinny's case, I actually don't think he meant to say that Aiko and Zelda aren't connected. What he really meant was just for chat to not watch the gameplay expecting Zelda, which is a good primer.
For anyone who's getting Legend of Zelda vibes, it's a pretty damn different game, aside from just a couple of visual similarities.
But as Vinny's watching Shadow of the Colossus' intro, you can hear the moment where he recognizes the Bridge of Elden quote.
And Sword. And horse, and bridge, and castle.
I don't know how you missed the Lostwood stuff from like 5 seconds ago, but that's not the point. It's very obvious in his tone, he just immediately ate his own words. But rather than apologize and admit there's something he could learn here, he just turned it into a joke instead.
Oh, and Zelda is in this. And Link. And Epona. And Ganon. Alright, I'll stop.
This was an opportunity. A moment where Vinny could have educated his audience on something he picked up on. Seriously. Shouldn't it matter that Vinny plays video games for a living? Like, if someone's gonna call this stuff out, shouldn't, of all people, that responsibility fall on someone like him? It's not like it's that hard to figure out. This doesn't just apply to Vinny. If you play Nintendo games for a living, and you didn't know that Zelda takes cues from the Ico series, I'm not going to say that that's okay, because I don't think it's okay. These ideas don't come from nowhere, and they're not meant to seem like they do. The only reason Nintendo fans don't know any of this stuff is because all their gaming experience exists in a bubble.
I feel like right now in the early days of Switch, that's what you're seeing, is that there's people who have the Switch and are hungry for
but
games
how many?
to play.
Well, how big is it?
The
How big is the audience?
Exactly.
What is it? 2 million units?
2 million.
yeah,
is
right,
what
'cause that's what they wanted
the
to hit by.
original launch
Yeah,
was
yeah.
at.
So let's take 2 million units.
Yeah.
Right now, do you ever sell in 10% of the install base?
Supposedly, Switch has a crazy attach rate with the
Well,
with
that's because
Zelda
there's
and then-
so few available. One of the
Yeah.
highest IPs of all time, right? Nintendo first party will deliver IPs that the Nintendo audience is just frothing for, right? So they'll have the highest attach rate of any new console
Yeah.
with their own specific IPs, Zelda and Mario. No, really, who really by the end of the life of the Wii, who else was making money on the Wii aside from Nintendo? How many titles sold for the Wii that weren't Nintendo first party?
Sure.
Okay. So what happened? So they started basically evaporating third-party support, right? Then we get to Wii U. What happened? Same.
No third parties, yeah.
So there could be some advantages for some people, but overall it's going to add up to the same thing. Smaller portfolio on the library, period. At the
And
end of the day, the catalog is going to be this when it could have been this.
But
You would
why?
have thought that maybe if there's no games for sale on a network, if people have a hardware device, maybe they'd like to know that a game has become available.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that, in a silly me.
Yeah.
If you grew up with Nintendo, there's a good chance you never leave Nintendo, and more crucially, there's a good chance you never actually grow up. Instead of complaining that Skyward Sword was boring, what people at the time should have said is how bold it actually is. And no, I'm not saying that out of any bias whatsoever. This is one of the key things that holds video games back from being appreciated as narrative art, because all the art intellectuals think that video games are nothing more than toys, and all the gamers are apparently only interested in the toy-like qualities of the games they play. Credit where credit is due, when Vinny streams a Zelda game, he does play it correctly, slowing down and making sure to read all the NPC dialogue like signposts.
Like a Twilight Princess. Shit, hang on.
So despite being a viewer of channels like AVGN, Narrow, or mathematosis, Vinny's been immune to all the big common misconceptions, which makes him an excellent example for this section.
It goes like this. All right, there's 3 separate timelines that branch off of Ocarina of Time. So here's how it goes. I want to explain because it's very interesting. I just learned some more little details in Hyrule Historia. So 3 different timelines. In one of the timelines, when Ocarina ends, Link goes back to being a child. That's the ending that we see. You know, Zelda tells the king, they find out that, Ganondorf was a cunt, and they decide to get rid of him. Many years down the road, they execute him. That's in Twilight Princess. But here's what happened to Link. Link wandered off into the forest without a fairy. And, Navi didn't get lost. Navi flies away. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Navi just flies away. And in the beginning of Majora, you see that Link is looking for a friend. And he's obviously in the woods. And it's highly speculated that, say if Majora did happen, let's just say it did, if it was real, if there really was a parallel universe that Link went to and returned from, well, that Link was forever forgotten. No one knew about the Hero of Time. No one celebrated the Hero of Time in this particular timeline. Just to further add to that, in Hyrule Historia, it's directly stated that the Hero of Time, was never to be seen or heard from again after Majora's Mask. And his regret over that, as it states in Hyrule Historia, allowed him to be the swordsman whose sole purpose was to teach the new Link of Twilight Princess the moves that he knew as a way to pass down his legacy. So the hero is successful, and the adult era, Ganondorf is revived, Hyrule is sealed and flooded. Because the hero wasn't even around, I don't think. I have to read into that a little bit more. I haven't gotten to the Wind Waker section yet. I know it's a little bit to wrap your head around, but it is exceedingly interesting. So, isn't this stuff really interesting? Like, I love this stuff, the theories. And it seems like Majora was the deepest and had the most psychological stuff going on there. So, and there you go. Tingle is a representation of Link. Tingle is a mutation of Link. Because he's a 40-year-old man dressed as a fairy. Which again is representative of the...
When I watched this in 2015, I was enthralled. I had a lot of fun revisiting Zelda with Vinny's Wii U streams, and then playing them on my own. At the age of 14, I hadn't played Skyward Sword yet, and I hadn't read Hyrule Historia, but I did watch Vinesauce, and that was my introduction to all this. I'm gonna criticize a popular streamer, but know that I do so with peace and love. I really don't think that Vinny is stupid, although he can be impatient sometimes. You can see here that when he applies himself, he's actually an enormous asset to media literacy. I'm also not the first person to ever complain about his reactionary approach to really just any game outside of Zelda that tries to be story-driven. It's not irrelevant either. There's a large example that I'm going to get into soon, but first, I just want to fully concede something. Yes, this is about loyalty and authority, and I'm going to address that directly before I talk about said example. Just because fiction isn't real, that doesn't mean that it's a lie or that it doesn't mean anything. In the end, art is what you make it out to be. If you're not receptive to it, you won't understand. If you laugh at it like it's a joke, then that's all you're allowing it to be for you. That's your choice. So to understand something from the perspective of the person who created it, you do have to drink the Kool-Aid. At least a little bit. But I think this is such a sticking point for a lot of gamers, not just Vinny. They've latched on to this false idea of player autonomy and quote-unquote freedom. That feeling you get when you're perfectly immersed in an artist's world, it's not freedom, it's surrender. There's only one correct way to play a video game, and when you do, you feel free. You feel like your actions are your own. And that feeling is, in fact, important. The player has to have control over certain small actions. It's something unique to the medium of games. Only in a game are you able to fully and completely immerse the audience in the role of your protagonist. But that really isn't a goal in and of itself, it's just a means to an end. Video games are curated experiences. At no point is the player in control of what context their small actions can be applied, because if you do something unintended, we understand that to be a glitch and not part of the design. Instead, the artist is in control of the context, which is why level design is crucial. It dictates the entire grammar of how games talk to you. There's just no such thing as a linear game. Terms like gameplay first and open world are not genres. They're marketing buzzwords, and they always have been. If you're someone who really enjoys open world level design, I have to stress that you aren't being entertained by an artist's imagination. You're just caught up in your own.